And welcome back to Coffee with the Editor here at the International Railway Safety Council's annual event. I'm at the PRASA stand, who are a sponsor of this event, which is being hosted by the Railway Safety Regulator, and I'm joined by the DDG of the Department of Transport. But thank you so much for joining me. Rail is quite topical at the moment.
It's not surprising that rail is topical because transport is the heartbeat of the South African economy, and rail as a mode of transport plays a very critical role, one, in this economy because it moves people. We might not be doing well, but that's what it does. It's a mass mover, guided transit. Secondly, it contributes to our economy in terms of the work that we do in freight industry, moving our product from both mines to the ports for us to be able to play in our export market. So it is really the heartbeat of this economy. And it's even this month, we are celebrating October Transport Month, which really a month that demonstrates our achievement and the kind of blueprint we are doing in terms of infrastructure. And we are happy. We're doing very well. You can see today, you can walk in PRASA's network, can walk in PRASA station. It is a construction site. We're stringing wires, we're rebuilding stations, we're hard at work.
So I see PRASA is hard at work, and it is Transport Month. So for those of you who don't know, here in South Africa we celebrate in October Transport Month. The recovery of the PRASA network is very encouraging, and I would like to talk to you more about the things that are coming in the future. So what is happening? So there are three things. What is happening with the devolution strategy? So that's one. The second one is in the original Operation Vulindlela reports, under passenger rail we spoke about concessions of corridors. I just want to know if that's still on the table. And the third thing, I would really like to travel by high-speed train here in my own country. Where are we at with that? So let's start with the devolution strategy.
You'll know that as the Department of Transport, we led government by approval of the White Paper on National Rail Policy, which is one of our critical policy documents that set the tone and where we are going. So as part of that, we have made very proper announcement on a policy on devolution that to make sure that we don't haphazardly just devolve and not know, because there are various elements of devolution. It depends what you want to devolve. One, do you want to devolve the operation standards? Do you want to devolve the operational subsidy? Secondly, do you want to develop lock, stock and barrel, which is everything operation, including tech and your trains? So we don't know yet, because various of those elements have been implemented all over the... So South Africa, where do you want to start? We want to start by developing a devolution strategy, which will then be able to set up the parameters for involvement. Where we are today, we don't know whether there's the municipalities or any that sphere of government have that capacity. Hence, we have been very clear that there's no devolution that will take place before we develop the strategy. In the meantime, beside what we decide in that particular strategy is that the current state-owned company that runs our trains will be in charge of that till we make that decision. So everyone in that, we are already advanced as the department, where we have already have a capacity on board to assist us in that particular element. And we have a steering committee which consists of all the metros, including provinces, to make sure that they make a contribution towards the... So it's not a product we're going to develop alone. We'll develop it together. And in terms of our time frame, which has been prescribed by the National Rail Policy, is end of 2024. So our plans in terms of the program that we have, early next year, around March, April, we'll be able to go out even in a general consultation with all the stakeholders before we take the strategy for approval to cabinet. We are on track. Okay,
well that's good to hear, because it hit the media and everybody was like, well, we can do our own thing now as a metro and as a municipality. So I think it's quite important that everybody understands what the roadmap is.
As we are currently, PRASA is hard at work in terms of recovering corridors. We're already experiencing shortfall in terms of operational subsidies. So whatever you devolve, you need to make sure that the budget elements of that system are taken, because we don't want to you don't want to do anything, and then the system collapses.
The other element that was in Operation Vulindlela, and that's on the corridor concession. There's quite a lot of excitement around the opportunity to do private sector participation and, PPPs in terms of developing passenger rail services. Where are you seeing progress? Is there potential opportunity for markets?
Yes, I mean the policy itself pronounced on concessioning, and how do we then bring in private sector participation, one, both in passenger and in freight rail, to be able to assist us. And concession has one model to make sure that there's third-party access. We are still welcoming it. It's something on par, but obviously you'll remember that for private sector to be able to put in their money, there must be some risk that they need to deal with. So those risks is really about how do we then level our playing field in terms of the regulatory approach. You'll know currently, which is pronounced in the rail policies, that we have what you call the interim rail economic regulatory capacity, which is IREC, which is the interim measure that any element that will be done in terms of third-party access, whether it's freight or passenger, we play a critical role in terms of dealing with that. So we're on course. The regulator, the interim regulator is operational, and we have actually hired some external capacity, which is chaired by people who have seen this kind of transition in the electricity sector, and some from the rail sector. So we are really working on that, and the private sector really have showed interest in dealing with those particular issues. So it becomes easy really in terms of freight, because then the operators bring their own trains, come in, you give them access, we are busy finalizing the access a framework for them to be able to deal with this issue. Obviously learning from the previous work that was done by Transnet, but infusing some of the critical elements towards that. So it's work. The difficult one, which is really is on passenger rail, because you remember that passenger rail or commuter rail anywhere in the world, it's a subsidized mode of transport. But as part of the policy dynamics, PRASA is, because we say where PRASA cannot be able to run services, or there's potential to be able to partner with the private sector. So PRASA as an organization, they're working in their models, obviously, of which routes and which elements will they be able to bring private sector on it. But concessioning, it's in the policy, it's a policy position of this government that we want to pursue in rail.
So for me, it's quite interesting to see the potential in terms of, that private sector participation from a passenger as a priority, freight as a secondary. So you put down your new line, you're running double stack containers in between, I'm going to be murdered by the experts, your passengers and your double stack freight to subsidize it as an alternative to government subsidy, as an interesting business case that's around that as a potential.
No, I mean, for me, that both, I think when you design your system, you need to decide what kind of output you want to get. We'll know, for example, a lot of countries, even in Europe, have what you call shared network. Yes. So where in the morning you're able to run your passenger trains, and then what you then do on your off-peak, and that's where you can be able to have freight trains coming in. It really depends on, one, your network capacity of what you have and what you want to implement. It becomes easier when you do it with your mid-speed elements, because then once you go, the maintenance element becomes more expensive. But for us passenger, it is a priority. And you'll remember that even currently, even though we've been affected by vandalism, we currently share the network of Transnet Freight Rail in terms of our long distance passenger trains. So it's something that is really can be done, but where you want impact on your commuter rail is really in your metropolitan areas, to be able to move your people from work to home, and how do they integrate among cities. And I mean, a case in point is really the work that has happened with Gautrains, which shows you, if you develop infrastructure from the beginning, what are the kind of the benefit that you can be able to have.
Yes, so where's my expansion of the Gautrain?
The expansion of the Gautrain is really a provincial function. But one principle is that for us, yes, as the transport sector, especially in particular being in rail is to then say any system that complements what we have as a country, it's very critical. Where I think we just need to be careful, especially when looking at the Gauteng expansion, that we don't duplicate the resources. Yes. The system itself must be integrated and fit into each other. Why must we have a PRASA line running from Johannesburg to Naledi and have the same Gauteng line running from PRASA to Naledi? But if government doesn't have money, we see, for example, Lanseria Airport, it's one of the new developing hubs in that area. How do you then have that Gautrain getting into Cosmos City, picking up your workers into Sandton and everything? And for me, in us dealing with that, is that how do you then have a differential approach of subsidy? Because like I said, it's a subsidy so that Gautrain cannot be only for the rich, but it can be integrated within the whole overall system in PRASA station and PRASA corridors, like case in point being, for example, your interchange in terms of park station. So it is something that in a principle of new development, I think it's well supported. The province must just raise their own, to deal with their own process and make sure that implementation happens.
All right, and then I'm obviously assuming there's been good solid backing behind the Limpopo-Gauteng link.
What we have done as the Department of Transport, we have been approached by the provinces, both of them saying they are interested in having this high-speed rail a framework, and we have been engaging in meetings in terms of what is this concept that they have, what is that they want to do, because currently there's a right-of-way in terms of the freight network that is running between Johannesburg to Polokwane, which is precisely owned by Transnet. But in other parts of the network, before you leave Pretoria, it's owned by PRASA. Yes. So the issue is really the dynamics of how do we then deal with that? So they are currently at the kind of pre-feasibility study as a province, not really a detail, just a scanning of the environment, the infrastructure asset, and they'll be engaging soon for us to be able to decide on a way forward. But like I said, high-speed rail is one of our elements. If it's implemented in line with the government policy and government framework, we had no liberty to not to support it. But as the Department of Transport, we are finalizing our own framework of prioritization of high-speed rail in the country, where we have developed a multi-criteria analysis to then say, how do you then rank your critical importance in terms of high-speed rail? We'll be taking that to cabinet because it's in line with the delivery of the policy in terms of our short-term intervention. But to give you the snippets, is that our prioritization talks to the three corridors in the country. Johannesburg, Durban being the first priority, secondly being Johannesburg to Mbombela, and then Polokwane being the third line. So if there's anything within our paradigm in what we want to achieve, I think that will be the line. And where we sit is really to align to the dream that the President has talked to about connecting cities and how we make transport being the heartbeat and the pillar of that particular strategy.
Well, I think public transport, for me, public transport is for everyone. And I certainly think that rail should be the backbone of that. And I don't think that we should be looking at, the PRASA trains for poor people and the Gautrain for rich people. I think rail should be for everyone, like it is anywhere else in the world. And it'd be lovely to see that integration come through for our country here in South Africa. So the further or the faster we can open our networks, our corridors, and expand the network to where people work and play and live, then more people will take up the use of public transport as their preferred mode of transport.
A rail must play its role within the national transport task to be able to then integrate one with other modes. I don't know if you have been recently in our new blue trains of PRASA. Maybe we must take you on a ride.
No,
and be in a Gautrain train. The standard is the same, if not PRASA better than the Gautrain. In terms of technology, in terms of comfort, in terms of the trains that we have can even do, once we get our signal up and running, can still do even more than 120 in terms of the queue. So there is no thing that PRASA is for the poor and then Gautrain is for the rich. Hence we then said the integration of not running parallel processes is very much important, that I must know I can step out of a PRASA train and get into a Gautrain train and not feel the difference, because those one are mass movers in terms of, and if the extension of Gautrain or the extension of PRASA can help us to be able to achieve that, I think for us it will be a win for the country, and the critical element of what rail transport must play for everyone. I mean, the element of safety, like I said, we actually made sure that within PRASA itself, how do we then up the security within the integrated security plan to make sure that our commuters are safe, they feel free. And I mean, the feedback that we are getting, it's really good that people are able to even use their cell phones on board trains and everything, because of the security features we even have of the train brings a sense of comfort and for people to be able to really conduct their business.
Well, I think I'm really looking forward to getting on a train from Johannesburg to either Durban or Cape Town. I think from an environmental perspective it'll be better, and I hope to be able to do that in my lifetime.
I don't know how old are you. It's a matter that we really take to serious to make sure that there is this element of high-speed rail, especially Durban, Johannesburg being one of the priorities. And I can guarantee you, in our lifetime, that's something that we must be able to implement. Otherwise, history will judge us very, very, very badly. And I mean, we see where rail has been really working, what kind of additional more benefits that is able to do. You're able to create even cities in between your corridors. You're able to create industrial parks and a number of issues in terms of those particular elements. So that's something that really we're looking for, that when you get to Harrismith as one of the popular stops, there is some development that works in that particular regard. This is an expensive exercise, but through public-private partnership, which I think is critical of this government, who are really something that we want to deal with. And there's been a lot of interest. I mean, you've seen with the Polokwane, that is something. So, and part of what we want to achieve as part of this conference is that some of these countries, which we know they are leaders in high-speed rail, they are here, will be able to share the lessons, so that when the Railway Safety Regulator as a regulator develop their standards of how do we need to implement railway high-speed rail, and what are the railway safety elements to be able to deal with that, because we believe that the railway safety regulator must play a critical role in ensuring private sector participation to third-party access, to ensure that this thing is ready, because there is dynamics of bringing multiple operators in your system. And the regulator, for example, from UK, they are here in other countries, for us to be able to share those lessons. So we're looking forward to this engagement. It's a critical element to enrich some of our policy direction and alignment within rail.